Okay, so let's talk about management in the church, because we are focusing on church administration. And whenever we're talking about church administration, we have to have a full understanding of what management is all about. Because we are saying that most churches don't really implement managerial principles or management principles. And so with me is Cynthia. Cynthia is one of our highly talented consultants and trainers in New Gates Ministry Consult. And Cynthia helps us to have a full understanding of how we can be able to implement some corporate principles and models into the church. And at the same time, she also focuses on taking some church principles and models to be actually implemented in the corporate world. So far in the corporate world, it works very well. And now we're trying to find a way of merging this corporate and Christian fundamentalism models together so that we can get the best in terms of church effectiveness and church efficiency. So Cynthia, help us to fully understand what management is all about, because most of the time people don't know what they're talking about when they're saying let's implement a church management strategy. So what is management? What is management all about?
Thank you, Bevan. I'll just give you a general overview of management. When we talk of management, we talk about the functions of management.
Right.
Even in the definition of management, we put the functions inside the definition, and this is regardless of the kind of organization, whether secular or corporate or church, because the church is also an organization.
Right.
So management is actually planning, organizing, leading, and controlling of resources in order to meet a specific objective.
So those are the functions of management.
Those are the functions.
Planning, organizing,
leading and controlling.
All right.
Exactly.
All right. Okay.
Yes. So now, when we dissect these 4 functions of management, it gives us the managing aspect.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So let's try to have even an understanding, a deeper understanding of these functions as you have mentioned them, Cynthia. The 4 of them. Let's try to see how they can be implemented or how they can actually be made relevant to churches as well. Let's start with the one that you mentioned from the top, the planning function. So what are we talking about when we're talking about the planning function in the church perspective?
Okay, when we talk about planning, Bevan, we are looking at the church, where it's going.
Right.
In other words, we are looking at the vision of the church. Like any organization, the church also has a clear picture of the future. That is the vision.
Right.
But for them to be able to get to where they want to be in the future, they need to first understand where they are today.
All right.
So now, when we're talking about the planning now, it's a matter of coming up with milestones on how they are going to get to their desired end.
All right.
Yes. So now when you are planning, they are going to plan on objectives or goals that they need to meet in order for them to get to the desired end. So they come up with reforms, they come up with activities, they come up with different programs.
All right.
So this is the planning stage.
Okay.
Yes.
And now when you're talking about the expectant end, as in the desired ultimate goal that a church is focusing on, this is more of a long-term vision, isn't it?
That would be a long-term vision.
That would be a long-term vision.
Yes.
How long do long-term visions usually span in most cases in your experience?
In my experience, when we are talking of a long-term vision, we are looking at a time between 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
That would be your long-term vision. But then, of course, others go beyond as 20 years. But then, in my own understanding, I think 20 years would be too long a time, and you may miss something in between before you get to the 20 years.
Right.
So it would be safer to work with the 5 to 10 years lifespan.
Right. I heard you at some point talking about something quite profound and interesting when you're talking about these different ranges of vision. And you talked about a short-term vision. Help us to understand more about that, because most churches do have a vision. In my own opinion, in our own research, we've noticed that it's an open vision. It's not necessarily stipulated with a particular period of time. So it's an open vision. But Cynthia is helping us to understand that we have a long-term vision, and obviously when you have a long-term vision, you have a short-term vision. Tell us about the short-term vision in the church.
The short-term vision, fine. Well, we can be talking about your 3-year vision, 5-year vision, your 4-year vision. But you know what? We also have yearly visions in the church.
Right.
Like what we call the theme.
The church theme.
The church theme, the annual church theme.
Yes.
Those ones are your short-term vision.
All
For
right.
example, we can have a church that will say this year, 2017, is a year of prosperity.
All right.
In as much as we are declaring it spiritually,
yes.
we ought to do some other things in order for us to have the desired end of the prosperity.
To accomplish, to attain that particular vision.
The prosperity,
All right,
yes.
all right.
So that's when you now sit and plan. What do we do? What reforms do we do? What activities should we do in order for us to have the prosperity that we want by the end of the 2017?
So the church is now putting up plans, aligning those plans with the short-term vision,
with the short-term vision,
the activities that they are going to be doing,
exactly.
the different services, the different programs,
yes.
the different, even pertaining to conferences as well.
Yes.
So those conferences are now feeding into the actual vision, the theme,
yes.
What we call the church annual theme
yes.
is in actual fact a church annual vision or goal.
Exactly.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, we don't have time to just dwell on that. Let's go to the second function. You said the second function is the organizing function. Tell us more about that function.
Okay, Bevan, it is very important to note that these functions, they are interlinked.
Right.
There's no way we can jump to organizing before we start with planning.
Okay.
So it's like a chain. From planning, now we have our activities, we have our programs,
right.
everything that we want.
Right.
We now go to the organizing stage.
Right.
In the organizing stage, that's when we ask ourselves, who is going to be responsible for these activities,
right.
or who is going to be carrying out these reforms? You ask yourselves, do we even have people who are able to carry out this, what we want?
Right.
And what about the resources? And when I say resources, of course I was talking about the human resource aspect. You can now go to your physical resources,
right.
the financial resources.
Yes.
Do we have adequate funds?
All right, right.
Do we have a budget for this?
To do this particular.
To do this.
And the budget
exactly.
in itself comes under the whole aspect of the planning.
Of the planning.
That we're talking about.
Exactly.
It's the financial plan in itself.
Exactly.
Wow, wow,
so
wow.
if we don't have, how are we going to raise money for this?
Right.
So already
your
that's
activities
exactly.
right are now aligning to this.
Yes.
So the organizing function, it's organizing the resources.
Yes.
The people, the finances.
Yes. Your physical resources. Now you are talking about maybe your machinery,
Wow.
the venues.
Right.
Do we have the venues
Right.
for these activities
The
that we want to
that
do?
you have
the
as a
buildings,
church.
yes.
All
Are
right.
they adequate, or we need to outsource and things like that? That is your organizing.
And I think also another resource that's crucial there is the time resource, Cynthia.
Yes.
Looking at time as a resource. Because in most cases, in my experience within the church, I've noted that so many a time, people put up a lot of activities, right? Let's say, probably for example, those activities are actually aligned to the theme of that year. But now these activities might actually be just thrown in a particular period of time, say in a particular weekend. And you have the men meeting, you have the women meeting, you have the praise and worship meeting, you have a particular project that is being done on the very same day. So at the end of the time, you realize that the time is not well organized.
Exactly.
It's not well allocated to the activities, as you say, that are building towards the actual vision that is there. That's quite interesting.
Yes, it is very important to note time as a resource.
As a resource.
Yes.
Okay, let's go to the third function. Now we said we've already looked at the planning function, we've looked at the organizing function. The third one you said is
that would be the leading function.
the leading function. Tell us more about it.
All right, when you look at the leading function, it is key to note that the most important resource that we may have in any organization, whether corporate or church, is the human resources.
Right.
We might have the financial resource, we may have the physical resources, the strength, but then it is important to know that for these things to be mobilized, the monies and the physical resources, yes, you ought to have human resources. Your people.
Right,
yes,
right,
yes.
Right.
So now when we look at the leading function,
yes.
you're now looking at your people. Are they able to motivate?
Right.
Yes. Because you have activities that you want to be carried out. So these people are supposed to be committed. They're supposed to be motivated, and they're supposed to have that degree of influence.
Right.
John Maxwell once said, Bevan, you can't talk about leadership without influence. Leadership is influence.
Right.
You can even use the two interchangeably.
Right.
Where there is leading, you can put influence. So what he was just saying basically is that when you are leading, you should be able to influence. Yes.
Wow.
So the people you have organized maybe as the head of departments or head of programs, are they able to influence the other people? To meet the objectives that you want to have?
Talking about that, Cynthia, you're reminding me of something very crucial. I have noted that in most cases, you have people being put up in a particular position, not necessarily because they have leadership skills, but maybe because they can technically do the work that is expected. I can give you a simple example. In most cases, praise and worship teams, in actual fact, you have a person who is a technical individual in singing or in playing an instrument. And that very same person is expected to lead, yet the skills that they have are not necessarily the leading skills, but they have the singing or playing skills. Okay, enough about the leading function. Let's go to the last function. He said it's the controlling function.
Okay. The controlling part, Bevan, it's more or less like you are now going back to what you had planned for in the first phase.
Okay.
And now you are looking at what you had planned and where you are.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Remember, it's that 1 year or I don't know how many years
that you have put as the vision.
Yes.
Okay.
But then it's your monitoring and evaluation.
Right.
You're asking yourselves, okay, initially we had planned for this, but where are we now? Have we deviated from the initial plan, or we are still in track?
Right.
There are so many reasons for deviating from the initial plan. Maybe you're seeing that the funds are no longer available, or you are running out of funds and yet you still have a lot to accomplish. Or maybe you figured out that you have hired the wrong person
in the position
you have placed. Yes. So that's when now you ask yourselves, how do we correct so that we go back in track? That is your controlling function.
So those are the 4 functions of management: your planning, your organizing,
your leading, and the controlling.